Before we start, I'm going to point out that here in Israel, we just counted the 29th day of the Omer. So for you, it's the 28th day, which means that we're only a couple days away from one of my favorite holidays, Lag BaOmer, which has so many amazing aspects to it. All the use of fire and caves, and in Israel, there's a lot of bow and arrows because of the Bar Kokhba revolt. And also it was the end of it was marking the end of the plague that was plaguing Rabbi Akiva's students. But also it very much represents the joy that we received from one of Rabbi Akiva's greatest students, Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who died on Lag BaOmer. And the tradition is out of memory of somebody, we make joy of their life on earth. So Lag BaOmer represents that. And before I start, I want to tell one of my favorite stories of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, for whatever reason, maybe because Jews were being persecuted for learning Torah, or because he felt that it was the best place to study, decided to take his son and learn in a cave, to learn Torah in a cave. So we went into a cave and started to learn Torah, and he spent I think 12 years. If I remember the story correctly, he spent 12 years or 6 years learning. It was a crazy amount of time with his son learning Torah, just the two of them, having a chavruta, a study partnership. And they studied and they felt that they knew the essence of Torah. So at the end of this time, they left the cave thinking they knew everything, that they could change the world and do a real tikkun olam. And they came out and they started to see things that they couldn't understand why people weren't following the Torah, why they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. So everything caught on fire. Whatever they looked at, it was like that X-Men guy with the shoots lasers out of his eyes. Everything caught on fire. And he realized that if he continues to spend time out of the cave, he's going to make everything catch on fire. So him and his son went back into the cave and learned for another 12 or 6 years, I don't remember. And they relearned what they had previously learned in a way in which they can understand the outside world. And they came out of the cave and they did the tikkun that they were supposed to do. And they brought, some believe, the Zohar or the Kabbalah into this world from that cave experience, from that second cave of experience. The Kabbalah was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So in order to make sure that our Torah today, our study, is successful and we don't turn things into fire, I'm going to recite the blessing over studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And today we're going to start at the end. We're going to start at the tefillah that almost finishes us up in Shacharit service. We talked about Pesukei de Zimra and Berkot HaShachar, about how we're supposed to meditate on these verses and psalms in order to create a mind space to approach God properly. And then we get to the Baruch Hu, or the Kaddish, the Baruch Hu, and then the Shema, in which we hear God's voice talking to us, that we're commanded to love God. And then when we're at that level, we understand that what God wants of us is love. We do the Amidah and we approach God and make bakashot, we make requests. And then after that, there's Torah reading on Mondays and Thursdays. And maybe there's Tachanun. There's a tradition to do Tachanun, you put your head down. And then we do a prayer called Uvalet Zion. And then if you're wearing tefillin, you're kind of taking off your tefillin, you're kind of getting edgy to get out of the synagogue. And we recite probably the fastest recited prayer in our prayer book, the Aleinu, right? Aleinu leshabeach ladon al kol. And then usually as a chazan, you're told by your teachers to go as fast as you can, to go v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai, right? So we're going to talk about this prayer. And what's interesting, and I'll point out some interesting things about the Aleinu, is that although we say it very fast, it might be the most important prayer that we have in our prayer service.
And
And
it's supposed to be so fast that we can barely get the words out.
sorry,
Period. I had no idea.
I'm sorry, what was that, Sue?
Period.
Can you all hear me? Okay.
Hang on one second. Hang on. Sue, can you hear us?
Oh, wait.
Now you're muted. Okay, she put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, Sue, no.
And everything you said.
Sue, I got your question. No, it's not supposed to be fast. In fact, it might be a prayer in which we should take all the time in the world, whatever we need. You see, it all starts with the original Hasidim. They're in the Gemara, or maybe in the Mishnah or the Gemara, and it talks about the original pious Jews that would spend hours in the morning praying. And I'm not talking about, the fur hat Hasidim. I'm talking about the Hasidim during the time of the Talmud. They were known as pious people, and they would pray for hours and hours. And it's said that these pious Jews would spend an hour before prayer meditating and an hour after prayer meditating. And I want to leave you with that thought. Why would you leave time after prayer to meditate? You prayed already. You spoke to God. What's the point? So I think we're going to get to there at the end, but that's where I want to start with that question. Why do we leave time after prayer? Why would these pious Jews leave time afterwards to meditate after they already spoke to God? So there's a funny joke about the Aleinu that I'm going to tell you, and I might get chewed out for telling you. I apologize, but it's funny and it will help you see where this is going. Somebody who was very close to a king, very close to a king, was fired from their job. They happened to be Jewish, and they were asked to give a last speech. And they got up to it was a Jewish community, and they got up in front of the Jewish community and they said, there's three things in Judaism that complain to God, that have complained to God. The first thing in Judaism that complains to God is the bracha, the blessing Asher Yatzal. Asher Yatzal is the blessing we say after we go to the toilet. And we say, thank you, God, it all came out well. If it did or if it didn't, we say, thank you, God, for creating us with bodies that hopefully work. And if they don't, still for creating us. So the Asher Yatzal complains to God, and God says, how can you complain? I gave you one of the Sheva brachot, the 7 blessings that we say at a wedding. Asher Yatzal, the Asher Yatzal. We say it in the Sheva 7 blessings after the wedding. So the next prayer that comes along, the next Jewish thing that comes along is the Aleinu. And the Aleinu says to God, God, you gave me the short end of the stick. Everyone rushes through my part of the prayer. Nobody really concentrates. So God said, how can you say that? I gave you the pinnacle of the most important. You are the pinnacle of tefillah in the Rosh Hashanah Musaf service. We say Aleinu, right? So Aleinu shuts up. So then there's something called a mamzer. I'm not going to get into the details of what a mamzer is, but it's a bad word for somebody who it's not a good word. The mamzer says to God, God, you gave me the short end of the stick. How do I there's no redemption for me. There's no redeeming. So God says, how can you say that? All the great politicians are mamzers. So anyway, so that's a terrible joke. I'm so sorry for telling it. We have wonderful politicians, but Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon HaKol, this wonderful prayer that we say at the end of every davening, Shacharit, Mincha, and Mariv, every day. Some people don't say it. We'll get into some of the rules about saying it, but the Aleinu it's a source of machloket, of argument within the sages and the compilation of the prayer book. You see the Rambam, one of our greatest rabbis ever, who wrote one of the most amazing halachic books, the Mishnah Torah, doesn't include Aleinu in his prayer book on normal days. And the Shulchan Aruch, which is Rabbi Yosef Cairo, which is where we get most of our laws today, we follow the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't include the Aleinu in his prayer book. It's actually someone called the Ramah, who is another great halacha source, who adds on to Rabbi Yosef Cairo's words about finishing prayer, and says that when we get to the end of the prayer, we say the Uvalet Zion, which has Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And then the Ramah says, and then after that, we say Aleinu l'shabeach. And we should be very careful to say it with full intention. And that when we get to V'anachnu kolim, you know, the V'anachnu kolim u'mishtachavim u'modim. When we get to this specific spot, we should not just bow with our knees, but bow from our waist all the way down. And that maybe there's many different traditions in Aleinu, but the Ramah goes off and says it's one of the most important prayers, and the kavanah and the intention has to be the highest. So let's start with a little bit of the history of Aleinu. We started with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was the student of Rabbi Akiva, one of the Tanaim, the Mishnaic sources that we have. And Rabbi Akiva would say that, Rabbi Akiva says that when he prayed, he would ask for mercy. And when he prayed a specific prayer, he saw 140,000 angels surrounding God, facing the throne of Kavod. And there God was on God's throne, listening to our prayers. And the way that Rabbi Akiva said it is not Aleinu, he said, the words were a little different. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at the words of the Aleinu, and we're going to see how powerful they are. The Aleinu was said back during the time of the temple, and it has a lot of controversy around it. But in the Gemara, it's noted that Aleinu was part of Rosh Hashanah Musaf service. So it really dates back to a very long time ago. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the text. Can you see the text and my screen? Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol. Ours is to praise the master of all. Latet gedula leotzer breshit. To recognize the greatness of the one who has fashioned our beginning. Shelo asanu ke'aratzot velo samanu k'mishpechot adama. That we're not like any other nation, and that we're not like any tribe of the world, we're not a tribe of a simple tribe. Shelo sam chelkenu kehem v'goalenu kechol hamonam. We don't have their chelek. We have a different place in this world, and a different destiny. Now, as you see on my screen, I left something in here that we don't say in our synagogue, but many Jews say it, and the original Aleinu had this in it, and we will talk about this specific sentence in a bit, and how it caused a lot of conflict. The sentence is, Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varik, umitpalelim el lo yoshia. This sentence here might have caused the death of thousands of Jews over history. We'll get back to that. Then we get to the very important, awesome part. V'anachnu kolim, we bow down, umishtachavim umodim, and we bow down and we acknowledge lifnei melech malchei amlachim, before the King of all kings, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed One, blessed be God. Shehuno tishamayim v'osarts, that fastened the universe and the planet. Moshavi ka'o b'shamayim mimal u'shchinatu zo megavhei meromim. Now I'm going to just skip ahead. Hu Eloheinu en od. God is the God of all, and there's none other than God. Emet malkeinu efes zulato. It is God's kingdom is true. Efes, zero, efes zulato, are partnered with God. Kakatu b'torato, and it says in the Torah, ve'adat hayom v'ashavot levavecha, that you may know today and understand His truth, that in your heart, Ki Adonai hu Elohim, that God is the Lord, b'shamayim mimal, in the heaven above, ala aretz, and on the world, in the land underneath God. And then we get to the second paragraph, al ken nekav lecha Adonai Eloheinu, and yes, we hope to you, Adonai Eloheinu, that we should see Petiferet, like kingship, Uzechan, your strength, La'avir Gilulim min haaretz va'alelim karoti karitun, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai. And I want to point out this word, L'taken olam, kind of connects to the story of the Rashbi, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. L'taken olam is tikkun olam. So in the Aleinu, not only are we talking about God's power, and we're bowing our heads to the truth of what all things come from, we're also saying that God's will is to bring completeness to or to fix the broken in this world. And this is all important to understand why this prayer is one of the most important prayers in our prayer book. And then all people will end up calling out to God, as if God, everyone on the planet at some point is going to recognize Adonai as the true God. They don't have to convert to Judaism, but they're going to recognize that Adonai is the true God. Yeah, it's interesting. And all the evil people will also turn to you. Yakiru ve'yedu, and they'll know you and they'll understand you. Kol yoshvei tevel, everyone all over the world. Kilechaticha kol berech, they'll bow down to you. Tishava kol lashon, and they'll promise to you with their tongues. Towards you, Adonai Eloheinu yichru v'yipalu v'lichvot shimcha yikar yitenu. They will respect your name and make it yakal, make it precious, or expensive is another word for yakal, precious. Vayikeblu chulam, and everyone will take upon themselves the yoke of your kingship. V'timloch aleim eira leolam va'ed, and this is my favorite. Ki malchut shechai u'me'omer timok lechavod kakatu b'toratecha. It's written in your Torah. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. God, you are forever. And then the last part, this is my favorite part, V'ne'emar, and this is from Zechariah. I don't know, Zachariah, I'm not sure how you say it in English. V'haya, and God was, Adonai. The Melech HaKol Haaretz, God was the king of everything. Bayom hahu yihiyeh, and in this day, God will be Adonai Echad, God is one, Ushmo Echad, and God's name is one. Now, we just went through all of Aleinu, which I think is important to understand how important Aleinu is. So I want to go back to that sentence that I brought up, Shehem Mishtachavim, that we don't say anymore. Now, the translation of that sentence is, and I'll share it one more time, sorry. Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varik umitpalelim el elo Yoshia. They bow down to Hevel, is from like Kohelet. From Kohelet is the book we read on Sukkot by Shlomo HaMelech that talks about everything is Hevel. Nothing is new in this world. It's all pointless. hevel is pointless. Varek, it's another word for verik is rake, is empty. Umitpalalim, and they pray to a God that is not a savior. So, what happened? Why is this not part of our prayer? It's part of a lot of other people's prayer book. The Orthodox, especially Chabad, keeps it in. A lot of Hasidim keep it in. Why is this a problematic part of Aleinu? And the answer is the history of Aleinu. I said this was said on Rosh Hashanah and during the temple times, but then we never said it during the week. We never said it during the day, the normal day. Around 1200, there was a pogrom in France, and a great rabbi afterwards heard a story that the Jews who were being burnt alive were singing Aleinu. And they weren't just singing Aleinu, they were using the nusach that you use on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the same nusach that we sing every Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל התגדולה ליוצא בראשית. We all know that, and that's such a powerful moment. If you remember in the synagogue, that's the moment when Rabbi Josh and we meet up in the middle, the ark is open, and we literally get down on our hands and knees and bow down to God. So this group of Jews who were burnt at the stake said Aleinu in that nusach. I mean, we think in that nusach when they were leaving this world. And a rabbi in France heard the story and introduced it and said, we have to say it every day after every prayer. Okay, that doesn't help us. What happened is Jews started saying this every day. But a Jewish convert to Catholicism knew the prayer and pointed out to the Catholic Church this sentence here, Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varik, that they pray down to pointlessness and nothingness, umitpalalim, and they pray to a God that doesn't save. And he said that, and this convert to Catholicism pointed at the Jews and said, looky here, they're calling our God, they're calling us, they're saying that we are pointless, and this whole prayer was built to shoot down the non-Jews and what the non-Jews believe. So more pogroms happened, and it was very, very, very bad. And many rabbis took out this part of Aleinu. There was a little bit of truth to what the convert to Christianity, to Catholicism, was saying. If you take the word varik and you take the numerical value of that word, it comes out to the numerical value of the name for Jesus in Hebrew, Yeshua. And the word lehevel varik also together are the numerical value for the prophet Muhammad. So there was some sort of gematria, weird thing that was there that might have pointed out that Jews were saying this to put down other religions. But there was an argument against that. And the argument is by a 14th century French scholar that we don't really know who he is. His name's Colbo. He has this whole things about prayer. And he points out something very beautiful. He points out that this prayer can't have been against Christianity or Islam, because it was fastened and put together by Joshua, by Yehoshua, by the prophet Joshua. And how did he come up with that? He said that when Joshua went and took siege of the city Jericho, he made this prayer to give thanks and understanding to God. Joshua was a great warrior. He was one of the greatest warriors. He could have easily said that his strength comes from his physical body and his amazing mind, but he never wanted to forget that all of his strength and everything that he had came from God. So it said, and this is a little bit of a far-fetched thought, that the Aleinu is, if you read it backwards, you get the word not Joshua, but Hoshea, which was Joshua's name as a kid before he got Yehoshua, the Yud, like that other great prophets get, or Yaakov, or not Yaakov. Anyways, it was an added on, but the Kovo says, listen, this prayer is not about putting down other religions. It's for us. It was created before Christianity was there and Islam was there. It was created by Joshua. And I would say that many traditionalists who, would say that this prayer comes from Yehoshua. So this is a very, very problematic sentence. And I want to point out a very disgusting tradition that I've seen personally. I don't want to put other Jews down, but I will say that in 770 in Brooklyn, in what's it called, Crown Heights, where the big Chabad yeshiva is, when you go there and they say Aleinu, when they get to this specific sentence, they all spit. They go, and they spit, and they're doing it saying we spit on other religions and other things. We don't do that in our synagogue. We don't believe we should be spitting on other religions. Everyone has their own bridge to God, and that's just not part of our faith, that they're wrong and they have their own way. But I want to point out that if you pay attention in Hasidic communities, you might see that part of the prayer added, and you might even see some Hasidim spitting, which is really sad. Before I continue, so the Aleinu is not said by the Rambam during tefillah, during prayer. It's not said by the great Joseph Cairo, who compiled our book of Judy. I have nothing against Crown Heights. I actually have wonderful friends who are Chabad, and they don't spit during that part. They're actually they don't do it. It's not a global Chabad tradition. It's something I've seen, and I just want to point out that I'm not putting down any other Jews. I'm just saying that tradition itself, to me, is a little bit of a problem. So we said that not everybody says this wonderful prayer that we just talked about, or not everyone considers it part of our tefillah. And I want to point out, and we have to admit, okay, I want to point out that there is a good amount of sages and scholars that say we should be saying Aleinu as part of our prayer. And one of them is one of my favorites, the Arizal, the Ari. You've all heard of the Ari, right? Now, the Ari is one of my favorite scholars, because the Ari basically is our source of Kabbalat Shabbat, my favorite prayer. So if we do Kabbalat Shabbat, and that was what the Ari brought into our Jewish tradition, then Aleinu is also, if we're going to follow the Ari in that sense, we should also follow him with the Aleinu. And what does the Ari say? Now, the Ari, going back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the so-called writer of the Zohar, the Kabbalah, the Ari was known for having found the text of the Kabbalah that he said was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Cairo Geniza, or some Geniza, or he found it in Egypt. It was an interesting story. And the Ari says many beautiful spiritual things, but what the Ari says about Aleinu is one of my favorite things. And Sue, this is connected to something that you do every day, I have to say, and it's wonderful. The Ari says that when we say Aleinu, this prayer of understanding that everything we have comes from God, there's angels in heaven, just like what Rabbi Akiva said. He saw the angels surrounding God. There are angels in heaven, and as we say Aleinu, they're saying, Ashrei Am Shekachalo, Ashrei Am She'Adonai Eloav. What did the Ari say? The Ari says that the angels are saying, Ashrei Ha'am, happy, joyful is the nation, Shekachalo, that is made like this. Ashrei Ha'am, joyful is the nation, She'Adonai Elohav, that Adonai is their God. So when we say Aleinu, in response to that, every day, up in the heavens, the angels are saying, Ashrei Am Shekachalo, Ashrei Am She'Adonai Eloav, Ashrei Am Shekachalo, Ashrei Am She'Adonai Eloav. Oh, ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh, oh, ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh, Ashrei Am Shekachalo, Ashrei Am She'Adonai Elohav. So next time you say Aleinu, and you really want to get full kavanah, full intention, think of what's happening above us when we say it. What's happening above us is God is sitting on God's throne and surrounding, I get it metaphorically, and all the angels are praising us for saying Aleinu. Okay, beautiful. That is amazing. But why Aleinu? Why are the angels saying that when we say Aleinu? Why? And this is where myself, but also the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, the great sage that talks about Lashon Hara. The Chafetz Chaim was the founder of Shmirat HaLashon in the Musar movement. So the Chafetz Chaim said it's not enough to just follow the rules of halacha. Like, you have to go beyond. And one of the most important mitzvot is not saying gossip of our fellow friends. And the Chafetz Chaim was the biggest Ben Adam Lechavero rabbi in the last 500 years. When I say Ben Adam Lechavero, he emphasized the mitzvot, the commandments between people and people. And to the Chafetz Chaim, that was the most important part of Judaism. There's a story, I want to just tell you a quick story about the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim had guests over for Shabbat, and the Chafetz Chaim was always worried about other people's, not shaming other people, not embarrassing other people, because we know in Judaism that someone who's embarrassed, it's like you've taken their life. When you embarrass someone, you speak bad about someone in public, you've literally killed them. That's what the way we see it in Judaism. And you might even, it is a terrible thing to speak and to embarrass someone. So the Chafetz Chaim was so careful never to embarrass someone. And he had a really, really big group of people over for Shabbat. And he had this beautiful, really nice tablecloth. And someone in the community, someone was sitting on his table and by accidentally spilt the wine on their tablecloth. And the Chafetz Chaim immediately saw what happened and kicked the table. And everybody's wine shook. And he's like, shoot, the table's leg is loose. In order not to embarrass his fellow. Finally, another story is with my Rabbi Rosen, who was my bar mitzvah teacher, who I have to tell this story connecting to the Chafetz Chaim. When I was at Rabbi Rosen's house for Havdalah, and Rabbi Rosen, I think must have studied with Rabbi Rosenthal, or he was probably a couple classes ahead of him in JTS, but they probably knew each other. And this is the same school of thought. It's these wonderful rabbis we've had in our lives. Rabbi Rosenthal, Rabbi Rosen, my bar mitzvah teacher. This is how great they are. Rabbi Rosen invited me for Havdalah, and we were learning Torah, and he had a beautiful white tablecloth. Now, not only a white tablecloth, his wife had passed away from cancer only a couple of years ago, and it was her tablecloth. So when I spilt a little bit of wine on his tablecloth, I tell you, I was broken. You know what he did to show that he didn't care? He took his wine and he poured it on the tablecloth. He skipped a step. He said, Don't worry, Hanan, I don't mind. And he poured his wine on the tablecloth. So this is the school of the Chofetz Chaim. And why do I bring up this Chofetz Chaim? Because the Chofetz Chaim understands the Aleinu and its importance. You see, we have just spent an hour, let's say 30, 40 minutes praying to God. We've made our requests. We spoke to God one-on-one. We've read Torah. We're in we're in the holiest place. We should be in the heavens. And we're thinking right. And now we're going to go out into the real world and go to work. Okay, we're going to go to work. And right before we go to work, we stop for a second. We stop and we say, everything that I'm about to do in the real world is from God. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol. It's upon us to praise Shabech Adon, the master of everything. That we shouldn't think for a second that what we're about to do in the real world is because we're just great, amazing. We should think we're great and amazing, but not in a cocky way that makes us think that everything is because we're the best. The opposite. We're about to go into the real world and remember that when we do dealings with our fellow friends, when we meet our friends for bagels and lox at, was it Einstein Bagels? Or when we're driving in traffic in San Diego and someone cuts us off and we say, how dare they cut me off? I'm me. We remember, no, it's Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol. We need to remember that. We need to bring in what we got from our prayer. And that is the beginning of Tikkun Olam. Because we said the Taken Olam, we said that there's this Tikkun within the words of Aleinu, we say Tikkun Olam. We take what we have in our prayer in Shacharit and Mincha and Mariv, and we say, how blessed are we that we get to talk to God in this beautiful way, that we get to say these wonderful prayers. And now we're going to go into the real world and we're going to spread that joy and light with Tikkun Olam. We're going to fix the world and complete the world. And Aleinu is that prayer. In other words, when we walk into synagogue, this is where I'm going to finish, because I think this is a very deep and understanding. The holiday of Lag BaOmer is about fire. It's about inner fire. It's about truth and emet. It's about what's inside and not what's on the outside. It's what the fire brings out of us. When we walk into synagogue after we've slept or after a day and we go to Mincha or we go to Mariv, we have to undress ourselves. We have to undress what we've just done, our experiences in a psychological way. We walk in again on Shachari and we meditate on these Tehillim, Hallelujah, Ashrei, we say Ashrei, and we're undressing our id or our ego or whatever you want to call it. And we get to the Baruch Hu and the Shema and the Amidah, and we've completely undressed, and we're completely, I'm sorry for these things, but we're completely naked in the face of God. And what does God do? God listens, and we truly believe that we empty out our souls to God, and God listens and gives us this precious gem. That's our Jewish prayer. And before we go out with this precious gem into the real world, to the world of everything around us, and we take that gem with us, we need to dress ourselves up. We need to dress ourselves up in a way that makes it possible for that gem to shine out of us, not in a way that keeps it in. We don't just unravel our tefillin and take off our talis and say, we say it with full intention. We bow down to God from our waist and up. We start with our knees and down, full bowing down. And we say, in general, the Aleinu is said out loud. And then we have dressed ourselves properly in order to share that gem with the outer world. And we are no longer people full of ego and this, that, the other. We're a people that want to do tikkun olam, want to fix the world around us. And there was a lot more about the Aleinu that I can share with you, but I think that's the essence of this prayer. So next time your chazan says Aleinu too fast, say, hey, wait, chazan, wait a minute. This prayer is, it's mamash, it's really the most important prayer. It's our clothing before we leave synagogue. And we can't forget that. So as I usually do, I'm going to sing Aleinu with you before we leave to remember the way it sounds. And one interesting, so why is it said so fast? Because it's the end of prayer. We're done. People want to get out. People want to go to work. People want to unwrap, they want to get out. It's the last bit. You know, what's really important about Aleinu is that there's a reason why we say Aleinu before Kaddish. Because if we didn't put a Kaddish or mourner's Kaddish after Aleinu, people wouldn't stay, they say. They wouldn't stay for Aleinu. They'd say, oh, you know what? I'm out. I'll say it fast and I'll leave. So we shouldn't say it fast. It's not right to say it fast. And I was born and raised with the tradition that kids make the most, it should not be said fast. It should be said beautifully. It should be sung with kavanah, because it's our close. It's taking our prayer from the world of heaven to the world below us, to the normal world. And that is also the answer to why the Hasidim took an hour before the first Hasidim. I'm talking about during the time of the Talmud. They would wait an hour before prayer to meditate, and they would wait an hour after to meditate, to clothe themselves properly after prayer, to not run out of the holiness of meeting God in the prayer into the world without contemplating the gem that they've just received. Anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot. It's a lot. You can see that I don't know, I feel like I've been in rabbinical school for already. It's like affecting everything I do. I'm just thinking, is there anything really awesome that there's so much beautiful things, but I think I'm gonna sing it for you all the way that I did it in the way I did it as a child, and you'll see that there's a lot of happiness and simcha connected to it. And then in response, just like the angels above us, according to the Ari, the great mystical sage, I'm gonna sing Ashrei one more time to represent the angels in heaven, listening to our prayers of clothing ourselves before going out into the world and trying to be real mensches instead of you know. So it's Aleinu leshabeach ladon al kol, latet gdula leotzer reshit, שלא עשנו כארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהן בגורלנו ככל המונם. And this is everyone's favorite part. אנחנו קוראים, we bow down, I go out of the screen, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ. You probably know this. ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. And it doesn't end here. This was always my favorite part of prayer as a kid, and you'll see why. על כן נקרב לך אדוני אלוהינו לראות מהרה תפארת עוזך להעביר גלולים מן הארץ והאלים קרות יכרתון לתקן עולם במלכות שדי וכל בני בשר יקראו בשמך להפנות אליך כל ישי הארץ יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל כי לך תכרע כל ברך תשבע כל השון לפניך אדוני אלוהינו יכרעו ויפולו ולכבוד שמך יכרתנו ויקבלו כולם את תום מלכותך תמלוך עליהם מהעולם ועד כי המלכות שלך היא ומיום מעט תמלוך בכבוד ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ואמר לאדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. It's a little different than we do in Shul, but that was the way I did it as a kid. Full of simcha, full of happiness. And what is the response in heaven when we do that with full kavana? Ashrei am shekach lo, Ashrei am she'Adonai Elohav, Ashrei am shekach lo, Ashrei am she'Adonai Elohav. Oh, ay ay ay, 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 ay. אשרי עם שככה לו, אשרי עם שאדוני אלוהיו, אשרי עם שככה לו, אשרי עם שאדוני אלוהיו. So I hope that we had a good learning and our prayers are not going to turn everything into fire, but make everything fixed and shalem. And I look forward to sharing more praying intentions with you soon. I think yeah, if there's any questions, I'm here.
I have a question. When you talk, the tune that you used for Aleinu was different than the tune that is chanted on Rosh Hashanah. And is that because it's more plaintive? Is that the whole purpose, to make it more plaintive at Rosh Hashanah, or how did that get established?
So something I really absolutely love in the nusach and the music of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is motifs. What does this sound like to you when I sing Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol atekedula leotze breishit? There's a little bit of Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, nai, 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 right? So that beautiful motif is almost put into the Aleinu, and it's interesting that we start if we start our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with a melody, that's the melody, right?
Yeah,
we always talk about, I always say that the melodies of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are the washing machine of our sins and our souls. You know, we enter the holidays of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and we put our souls into the washing machine with these melodies and we come out clean. So if we start with that melody, it's got to be one of the most strongest melodies. And then we sing, and then there's a motif in this Aleinu, Aleinu. But it's a little different. It is a little different.
Yeah.
We definitely don't, there might be communities that rush through it. You don't, Aleinu for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is one of the oldest prayers, and we don't, you could, again, I would never sing it fast, or I would take it very carefully, full intention. We have to fully go down on our hands and knees and head to bow down to God. So when I do get to sometimes Al Ken Nekav Lecha, I do go fast with that a little bit. But the melody, and that's a traditional melody. I don't know when it goes back to, but it's like the Aleinu melody for so many Ashkenazi Jews.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question. It's and again, I love motifs. So if there's a little bit of if there's a little bit of a motif going on in the melodies, and there is throughout all of the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you hear it in my Avinu Malkeinu through the Avinu Malkeinu I do every time I do El Malei Rachamim. There's a little bit of the Avinu Malkeinu that I do. Avinu Malkeinu Aleinu Melech, and it's Utzro Vitzro. It's the same melody I use a little bit in the El Malei Rachamim. It's a motif that I find it's important to remember. Ein lanu melech ela ata, that we don't have another king other than you, God. Even in our mourning, in our despair. So yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No one does. I have a second one. When you were
Yeah.
talking about the spitting, I was raised in born there, lived there 3 years in Crown Heights, but in East New York, Brooklyn, where my parents were raised, my grandmother, if she heard Hitler's or Stalin's name, she would go that gesture that you did with the spitting. And so it was like the ultimate insult. But do you know where that comes from, this idea? Maybe Norman does. The idea, that kind of spitting gesture.
Well, I have to say two things. One is, I don't know how old the tradition is. I talked to you about Vehevel Varik.
Yeah.
Verik, Reik means emptiness. You know how to say to spit in Hebrew? Lirok. Lirok. It's the same shorish, same root. So that might be connected to why people spit, and it's with regards to believing that the other people are not on their level. I like the Chofetz Chaim, the other way of saying this is a prayer about being menches, and menches doesn't just apply to our community; it applies to everyone. Tikkun Olam is for everyone; it's not just for Jews. So, you know.
At any rate.
No, I don't know where the tradition comes from, but I do know that unfortunately it exists in some parts of the Jewish world.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to spend some time with you, and thank you for joining me.